Hello, everybody. I'm John O'Loughlin. Welcome to McDuff Lives. And it's Wednesday night, and I'm so happy to welcome back David Cranmer, Underdown. David, was great to have you with me last week when we had Bill Taylor with us, and we were digging into a whole lot of interesting stuff together. Um, Tonight, I have to confess I've spent many hours watching Mark Kulacz Housatonic Live YouTube channels and catching up with his work on particularly this timeline on remdesivir. And so I wanted to know if you, like me, are finding that work really awesome.
I am. I mean, I feel like I could definitely be a contender for Mark Kulak's biggest fan. I really think he's puts together incredible shows, and I love his format, the long formats, and really getting into the characters and the histories. And yeah, I've watched all of his latest stuff, and I feel like he just keeps getting better and better.
Well, one of the things that I've often focused on is trying to sort out who are the teams that are playing and who's on what team. And he did an awful lot of that recently in sorting out the difference between the DTRA, the Defense Threat Reduction, what I don't know,
Agency.
agency, and on the one hand, and BARDA on the other. And I thought that was pretty compelling.
Hmm.
Uh, you had Sina Bavari first. He's been at USAMRID at Fort Detrick for like 20 some years and eventually like 28-year career. And toward the end of it, he gets in trouble for running a toxic workplace and making people uh, bend to his will as to what projects are going to get funded, which ones are you're allowed to actually submit for the funding. And he was actually he was they said he was not to be in a supervisory position anymore as a result of that. Yet, uh, the next thing we know, BARDA is now attracting a lot of the former DTRA people, and this is going on as the election of 2016 is happening, and President Trump, in Mark's view, they didn't think Trump was going to win. They thought it was going to be Clinton. All of that stuff starts to make a lot of sense to me, but it's complicated. So I'm going to ask you to tell me what are your big takeaways from Mark Kulak's work on this timeline of remdesivir, and how can we kind of simplify it so we can all understand it better?
Well, I think Mark is trying to do a really thorough job of giving different characters a fair chance and not just judging characters that get a lot of publicity. It's very interesting. Why? I mean, I don't consume a lot of media, so I don't really see it as much. But he made a big point of being compassionate towards Dr. Ralph Barrick from the University of North Carolina in Chapel Hill, who of course has a long history with working in coronaviruses with bats, with the bat woman, Dr. Ji, I believe her name is. That's the head of the Wu Tang, or not the Wu Tang, the Wuhan. I'm thinking my Wu Tang clan. The
Uh-oh.
the WIV, the Wuhan Institute of Virology, with a famous. Um, and again, he did it when he initially did his show. His criticism was not that he was doing weapon secretly doing weapons grade. What his critique was that he jammed out a paper and a study in literally a week that normally takes what he said was the normal 9 months to 2 years, is sort of a time frame for a doing a white paper. So and I think that criticism is valid. And again, I know it was warp speed, and we were under emergency situations, so the kind of the rules were different. But um, the thing that I also really like, because I love teams and I love the organizing people by even down to the uniform and the mascot and all that stuff. I that's the way my mind works. And with DTRA versus DARPA, I do think there's a lot there. DTRA, just to review, was created out of the Nunn-Lugar Act, which was the Russian Nuclear Non-Proliferation Agreement, which was Sam Nunn, who is a senator from Georgia, and Richard Lugar, who is a senator from Indiana. So the DTRA was created to handle the materials that were coming from the old Soviet Union, whether there were nuclear materials, biological, or chemical materials. And that was sort of the agency that was created to handle those materials. And I think a lot of the what was called the vector and the biopreparat scientists that were doing the Russian programs, I think, were integrated into DTRA. The DARPA is much older. That started as ARPA, and that was an Eisenhower program that was really a response to the Sputnik, and it was a way to create these advanced research projects. We'd done all of this investment during the World War II in the Manhattan Project, in the different the different National Defense Research Council's projects. They wanted to sort of keep that going, and so DARPA was a way, or ARPA originally was a way to kind of keep these projects going and sort of find a home for them. And then it develops into DARPA, which is the Defense Advanced Research Projects, I think, Administration. And that was, things like the creation of the internet, a lot of the early computing. So I do think there is a difference between these things, and I sense Mark's frustration, because I do think characters like Robert Malone sort of gets a free pass by a lot of people, whether and again, like, I don't know if it's just a public relations, he's gotten a whole team of people that, signal boost him and, make him into this, the voice of reason, and don't really analyze his career. But, I think that there's a lot of frustration because, Mark does do these really, in depth down to like his, the different organization he's worked for, the different contracts he's, been a part of, as far as getting emergency use authorization for medicines, or also taking orphan drugs and kind of repurposing them to new entities, like kind of more smaller, pharmaceutical companies, and then bringing them to like a larger organization like Merck. And Mark's done all of that legwork.
It's really a frightening thing, though, to consider the pressure that has been brought on behalf of the one drug called remdesivir, which Mark has identified as causing what he said was more deaths than the disease itself. Or, he speculated, but it's a reasonable speculation from his point of view. And that idea that why first, why does the government allow it? But before that, why does the company that made it, why don't they just recognize the fact that it doesn't work and it's giving bad results, and just stop? I know that this comes from Gilead, and that has always, as soon as you say Gilead, then you say Donald Rumsfeld. This is a kind of a dark avenue to look down. As far as I'm concerned, though, the timeline that he's laid out there is fairly compelling to think, yeah, somebody has got some extra, juice behind this remdesivir, and they just won't quit and just keep on pushing it, even though the results have been often quite tragic.
Well, he has done a lot of work and is working with groups that have really, analyzed the data as far as the um, the how people have reacted to it. It's an area that I really don't feel like I can trust any of the data. I mean, I know it's terrible to say that, but from the very beginning, I've been very suspect of, official medical data. And again, it's like, I don't, I just, I don't have good personal experience, and I'm just, I feel like they want to definitely have a narrative supported by data. But again, you know, I just go back to the very first conversation we ever had when I was doing financial analysis. A lot of the modeling, like, I could see right away, if you just change a couple basis points in your expected rate of return, you can really tell two different stories depending on what you want to do. And I feel like with statistics and with collecting data, it's really hard to know. And also, even with the tests that are used, whether it's a PCR or the swab test kits or whatnot, like, I'm just not 100% convinced that's able to give information that's accurate consistently. And again, like, I that's just me speculating. I don't have any credentials to say that. But again, like, I just look more at human relationships, like the Snohomish County man being the patient one that is his success from remdesivir is used to get emergency authorization at the CDC. The person that authorizes it is Nancy Massonier. Her brother is Rod Rosenstein. Rod Rosenstein is, in the Justice Department. He's the acting Attorney General of the United States. And then after he leaves, he goes to Spalding and King, the exact same law firm that Sam Nunn, who is from the Nunn-Lugar Act and the DTRA, he comes out of the same tree. And he also was somebody that worked with Robert Mueller when he was a DA in Boston. So there's a lot of old relationships with these groups. So I'm just skeptical of all of it. But it's, again, Mark, his he's really he must have watched something where people have really gone off on this Robert Cadlick. And I'm not even 100% sure if he was in NIH or what his role was, but I am personally suspicious about Robert Cadlick because he was a consultant for Emergent Biosolutions. And Emergent Biosolutions is it's the vaccine company that was originally called Bioport, that was originally actually part of the Michigan's health department. And it was initially a state vaccination program, and then it was taken private, I think, in the 90s. And then they became the company that was getting a lot of these stockpiles. We're having these emergency vaccination stockpiles, anthrax vaccines. Emergent Biosolutions was the company that
And,
was.
and let's not forget that that's from Porton Down.
Yeah, of
So
course.
this is not just a private industry. This is the British government's most elite bioweapons facility, right?
Yeah, it's the equivalent of the our Fort Detrick, or what I really think the relationship is, this Vigo ordnance factory, which is in Vigo, Terre Haute, Indiana, which was supposed to be the main facility for making anthrax during World War II. And of course, that ties right into the Eli Lilly. So, I mean, now we've got, Rosenstein with his Sam Nunn connections, and now we've got Mitch Daniels, our president of Purdue University currently, but he was a protege of Richard Lugar, who was the other half of the Nunn-Lugar Act. And he was a mayor of Indianapolis. He was a governor of Indiana. He was a senator. And this Mitch Daniels is, was the head of the Hudson Institute when they moved it to Indianapolis. They partner with Eli Lilly. This is in the 80s. And then he goes on to work for Eli Lilly, which is the same company that Alex Azar comes out of, who was the, very influential person in the rollout. So, I look at all these characters, and I'm just, again, like Peter and George have been talking about these trust operations, and I really think that's what this is. I think all these top people are in an old style like trust operation, and I can't believe that it goes on and nobody is just like they're. But again, like I don't know if they're. I mean, some people have to know that there is this mass persuasion, going on without solid backing. But I'm just horrified by it all. I've been for a long time. It's partly why I just feel, very hoping that there's some sign, something where we'll get some traction on, challenging it or having like some consensus. Cause I just feel like right now there's a lot of different opinions and, not a lot of good, facts. There just aren't there aren't like facts that people can like really stand behind at this point.
Yeah, and we believe, of course, that that's now, as from the based on the work we've done, that this is by design. We are being kind of programmed to not know what's really going on and somehow to accept it. And we learn how to accept it by distracting ourselves, television to internet to drugs and alcohol and everything else that you can do to just distract yourself from the fact that you don't really know what the heck's going on. And it is depressing to be I mean, honestly, I thought we were entitled to know what was going on so we could have a meaningful life. If we don't know what's going on, our lives tend to just be a series of events that don't add up to something. And I've personally always wanted my life to add up to something. And to peel back these layers is all we can do right now. Just keep on pulling it down. And a lot. I think there's a lot of wisdom in the idea that it does take a shock, um, a sexy, no, not like Rick Bright means.
No.
I mean a real shock, like a black swan event,
Yeah.
to generate the kind of interest in actually digging into what's behind the curtain. As long as the gas prices are tolerable, as long as people are feeling fairly comfortable and are able to kick back and watch football on their televisions and uh, get by, I think they're not likely to want to do all the kind of work that you and I feel is necessary. And so, yeah, it's kind of like being stuck until the next big crisis comes along. But see, that's the other trouble is that they generate the crises now. They have a whole file cabinets full of pull out the crisis for this thing and how do we deal with that. While I'm just thinking of it, it seems to me in retrospect that Supreme Court decision in which uh, the formerly federal constitutional right uh, to privacy generated the protection of women's rights or claim to rights to have abortions. And that decision, although it seemed like it favored the conservatives because the conservatives are the Right to Life party, it actually was very, very powerful in energizing the Democratic women and the Democratic women's base. And that's something that hasn't really been talked about as far as I can see in the press. The press is still, just all over Donald Trump as much as it can possibly be. But that manipulation, I mean, I don't know why they had to decide that case right then, and to take away all the jurisprudence that was built around the right of privacy from William O. Douglas to now, 50, 60 years of jurisprudence, and just wipe it out. Well, okay, but that leaves the women that are the women's rights advocates, and there's a whole lot of them in the Democratic Party, uh, very upset. And that was possibly a sneaky way to make sure that Donald Trump, and or Donald Trump surrogates would lose in the midterms.
Well, I think that I've sort of sensed that that was happening just based on a couple conversations I had with some of my parents' friends, and they were talking about how their grandkids that were voting age and young voters were really energized by that issue, and how that people in their sort of demographic of college age girls and things like that was something that was really connecting with them. And our University of Michigan is famous for being one of the most liberal, universities, and they were apparently had the, lines all the way, wrapped around. And so I mean, I think that they, I think these different, you know, Rands or Hudson or Hoover Institute or, Brookings, like these think tank or Council on Foreign Relations, like, yeah, I think that they war game out and they do analysis on which issues um, will connect with make people move or make them call to action. And yeah, I think it's all thought out. And you know you can speculate on what they're trying to you know putting all the attention on that issue, what other issues you're not focusing on. I mean, I think it's again, it's I've just I'm not invested in any of the candidates, so I feel like I can you know I'm not I don't know, it's hard for me. The whole Trump was a long shot and he came out, like, I'm just not on board with that. Like, I respect Mark's you know opinion on stuff, and will listen, or would debate him on it. But again, like, my thinking is that Trump has an intelligence background, and he was a the Resorts International is always an impossible thing for me to get over, because that's the United Fruit and the Meyer Lansky Network. And his real estate plays started with the Pritzkers and Hyatt and all that stuff. So to me, like, I don't see him as this like independent person. I mean, I think he can. I think he creates a really strong reaction. Positive. You love him or you hate him or whatever, which I think is valuable as far as messaging. But I personally am not. I've just never connected with him. And the more I look into his background, the more I'm just not. I just don't find him to be a like an independent voice that's sort of argued sometimes. But that's just from what I've studied.
Well, just to pursue that from my point of view, I would agree with you that there's just no way that he's an independent voice. But I do kind of like the idea of within the elites, there are gangs that fight against each other. And I think the Trump gang and the Clinton gang may well have been at war with each other. And the resolution of that is still up in the air. And certainly the manipulation of events since well, from Biden's what should we say, assumption of the presidency to now, it just, to me, everything has just been manipulated by the administration. The facts don't matter a bit. From the Ukraine war to their COVID policy, it's been pretty much of a narrative and very little of real facts or science behind it. So I and the dissing of MAGA and the whole MAGA movement has been kind of just pushed off of the radar. People are unlikely to be wearing those red MAGA hats for the next election. I think that's been an accomplishment of one side or the other. So I would say yes, I agree with you that Trump is certainly an insider, and uh, we could go into that, but on the other, yeah, there's a picture of him at a wedding recently with his hand. He's got the hidden hand symbol of what is putting inside of the jacket,
Yeah.
like Charles's two boys have done too, and so many of these really high up elites are often, you'll see them with a picture with their hand hidden in the jacket to signify something. Nod, nod, wink, wink. So yeah, he's an insider, but I do think that part of the insider game is to fight it out over big contracts and big financial. Uh, like I told the protecting the nest last night on our show. Uh, they're they're all competing to suck at the same tit.
Yeah.
That being the big financial power, and sometimes the Republicans are chosen, and sometimes the Democrats are chosen, and I don't think that the results are ever going to be a landslide again. It's always going to be right up to the last minute and bargaining, and who's if you do this, I'll do that, and I'll give you Afghanistan if you give me Libya, and right up to the last minute. But it's all part of the overall scheme of reducing the world into a corporate fascist one world totalitarian nightmare government.
Yeah. I mean, I've been, every just even like learning about, the Fabians and their connection with the Council on Foreign Relation, and how those roots were planted, or seeds were planted, and what they've sort of developed into. Like, it is, again, like, very depressing for me, but I just try to keep pushing forward and learning more. But as far as Trump and Tiffany Trump's wedding and all that stuff, I mean, I was just going through the whole history of that. Like, Tiffany Trump, I forget the guy, like Boulis or something was the name of the guy that she married at Mar-a-Lago over the weekend, and they were introduced at the Lindsay Lohan club. And like, I go back because I remember when like Paris Hilton and Brandon Davis were mad because Lindsay cheated on or Paris's boyfriend cheated on with Lindsay with Starvos Narchos, or whatever, the one whose grandfather was the great rival of Aristotle Onassis. And of course, for me, like, I'm always blown away because his daughter lives like literally a block away from me. I mean, he was married 5 times, but one of his, Charlotte Ford, and his daughter lives in Birmingham. And and Brandon Davis, his dad, was the one that bought Fox with Mark Rich. So he was a big oil person out in California, and they, hired Gerald Ford again. So you get all these like old characters that recycle, and then they bring through the the kids, and like and then that's like partly why it's hard for me, because like I had people that I played lacrosse against that I know Don Jr. and Ivanka, because they went to UPenn. They were the same year. They would have known each other. They would have run the same circles. So I look at it like, I look at who the kids marry. That's always really interesting to me. And, of course, Trump's first wife is so intriguing because she's a Czechoslovakian, and her dad was intelligence. And of course, I'm always like, oh my gosh, my mom's childhood friend's great uncle was Edward Beneš, who was the president of Czechoslovakia during World War II, and his her dad's sister is married to Zbigniew Brzezinski. So all these like Czechoslovakian spies, like Robert Maxwell, is a Czech spy. Like those are all the characters I look at. So like when you hear all these things like, well, Trump is, going over to have dinner at Jeff Epstein's house all through the 90s, and like they're very close, and they've got, he's coming to Mar-a-Lago and all this stuff. Well, that's where I look at it. I'm like, okay, well, he had a Czechoslovakian wife whose dad was intelligence. Robert Maxwell is sort of one of the mentors of Epstein, so he's going to be, Maxwell is supposed to be the big super spy. That people think of him as being British because he's the Times Mirror Group and the Pergamon Press, but he's really from Czechoslovakia. And so that's the way I look at this stuff. Like I connect Robert Maxwell with Madeleine Albright and Joseph Korbel and Zbigniew Brzezinski through the Beneš marriage. So that's how I look at this stuff. And then of course I go down Korbel is the advisor of like people like Condoleezza Rice, who's currently the head of Hoover Institute, which is where George P. Shultz, who was one of the directors with Donald Rumsfeld at Gilead. I mean, he was also Thermanos. Like Schultz is in there with all these guys. So like that's the way I look at it. Like I don't see, like I want there to be a a football game where one team's wearing this uniform and another one's wearing this uniform, but with the intelligence, I feel like there's always a third hand, or like maybe it's like, think of it as like the ref manipulating the game somehow. There's always like a manipulation in there, and that's like the way that I try to look at it. And again, it's like I feel like people have confidentiality agreements where they're not allowed to talk, or they're compromised. They fear for their family. I mean, that's the way. But at the same time, like when I talk, I feel the same way. Like I honestly fear for myself and my family. I feel like I'm just like beyond hope at this point. Like I'm just going for broke at this point, because I feel like I've not, there's nothing I can do besides just try to unwind it the best I can. But that's how I look at it. Like I don't look at I know Trump has a big following. He creates a lot of interest. So he could, I hope that he, would be helpful. But I mean, I didn't listen to his announcement, but people played clips of him talking about Operation Warp Speed, and he's just tripling down on that it was the greatest accomplishment of the 21st century. And I'm just not on board with it. So it's really hard for me to, overlook that and, get behind more of his aesthetics, like, the flags and the patriotic language and stuff like that. It just doesn't match for me.
Garland Nixon was commenting yesterday about football games that have these really militaristic ceremonies at the beginning, and the announcers are talking always about the patriotic military and everything. And I think we are being groomed for war, and these incidents that keep happening, like the missiles that supposedly hit a tractor in Poland, and then the Ukrainians said, well, it was the Russians that did it, but then and I think NPR or PBS, someone said, came out and said the Russians did it.
AP.
Who was it?
AP.
AP. And well, them too then, but that was wrong. And the more rational authorities knew it was wrong, and they came out and said it was wrong. But these things are going to keep happening until something worse happens, I'm afraid. And once again, it does seem like we're being led in that direction. Yeah, I wanted to though ask you before I forget since you made your comment about how easy it is to affect a result by changing a few basis points. What's going on with the economy? Why suddenly we've got, these 7% interest rates and things that, I mean, I thought our houses were going to start going up again. I thought we were going to start feeling like, oh, I wasn't so stupid to buy this place. But now they're all saying, oh, no, the housing's going to go down because you can't get a loan. And,
Yeah.
oh, so, what, who's, what's your opinion?
It,
Why is this going on that we're being punished once again by raising the interest rates?
well, I mean, again, I think that the stock market is a psychological tool that they use to either make you feel confident or afraid. And people look at their retirement accounts or the value of their home and all of these things. And I mean, I think back to the charrette where we all in visiting in Maryland, and what happened? I mean, the petroleum market inverted. It went negative. I don't know if people remember that. Gas
Oh yeah.
prices went negative. And of course, Trump was, just like, oh, I filled up the tanks, I filled up the strategic reserve. And it's like, oh, I'm a good businessman, buy low, sell high. Like, look at my business acumen. Well, I was like, that is like, um, our dollar is based on gas, on petroleum prices. I mean, it's a petrodollar. It's based, that's a sort of a financial asset that is used to back our currency. So I was like, gosh, I mean, if the currency inverted, I mean, yeah, it sounds, people, and again, like people are very trained to think, okay, if gas prices are low, then that's a good thing because I'm not, spending as much money to, do what I need to do, and goods and services are not as expensive to transport or whatnot. But again, like I feel like they've war gamed all these little things like gas prices or food prices, or like really can affect the really truly affect the emotions of people. And um so I'm looking, obviously, like a lot of attention is being talked about this FTX, this crypto Bitcoin company, and this Sam Bankman Fried. And but again, like I really think that it's got the same old roots. Sam's parents are both lawyers at Stanford. They both are in the law department at Stanford. His aunt Linda Fried is she's the chancellor of the Columbia Mailman School of Public Health. And that's the exact same school where we have our friend Jeffrey Sachs that's leading the Lancet COVID Commission. It's where Peter Daszak is a professor. It's where Ian Lipkin is a professor. It is also where Yen Pottinger, the wife of Matt Pottinger, and Matt, the husband, happens to be currently at the Hoover Institute, which is also at Stanford. So this Sam Bankman Fried, he's a crypto genius. If you watch the quick background on him, he talks about how he got started because he noticed that Bitcoin was selling for 10,000 in the U.S., 11,000 in Japan. If you took your basic finance class in college or economics, you know that that's a arbitrage opportunity right there. You can buy in one place and sell in the other. This is like going back to currency swaps and trades going back hundreds of years. So apparently, with all of the people following the crypto markets around the world, all the really smart people that are have all these degrees in quantitative analysis, nobody noticed that there was a 10,000 to 11,000 for the same asset between Japan and the United States. So he just bought that over and over again until he accumulated $40 billion in his island, which happens to be Paradise Island, the same place that Resorts International seemed to set up. Yeah. And who's the person that owns the hotel where he and his 10 roommates live and are doing these, incredible, insightful $10,000 to $11,000 arbitrage where you just do the same trade over and over again to stack a pile of money to 40 billion. The guy's name is Joe Louis, not the boxer, like Louis, our great, brown bomber from Detroit that everybody loves. This is Joe Louis, the British pound Bank of England backbreaker with our friend George Soros from the 80s. And he is, the name of his fund is called Tavistock Fund. So now we're talking the Duke of Bedford and our friends, the Russell family, which is going right into our Russell Trust and Russell and Company and the old Yale Skull and Bones. So again, is it all the same? I mean, you've got our Steven Schwartzman. He's the the founder of BlackRock. He's a Skull and Bones guy from Yale. You've got Steve Mnuchin. He was our Treasury Secretary. He was Skull and Bones. There's a lot of interest, and I so that's the way I look at it. I feel like he's a kid that is easy to pick on. He's sort of a geek, and I feel like they've given him the Albert Einstein hair, the wild hair. They wanted to be like this genius kid, but again, like this, the backstory is garbage. The whole arbitrage. I worked at Munder Capital, which was it was an investment management firm that did mutual funds, and I worked in the equity trading desk, and so I know about following positions and trading and sort of how it spreads and things like that on different securities. And it's just a stupid story. I mean, it's literally like a story that you would tell a second grader. Oh, it was 10,000 here and 11,000 here, as if the market wouldn't react to that, and you would just repeat that over and over, and nobody else would go in where like in a market, like a auction market, where the price gets closer and closer the more as people are competing for profit. I don't know. I mean, it's been a long time since I've taken econ, but it sounds like a BS story to me.
I took econ.
Do you remember?
Yeah, I remember the all-nighter before the exam.
Do you remember butter?
What was it? Guns and Butter?
Yeah.
I don't remember no. What was the punchline about Guns and Butter?
Demand curve. It's just a way of you draw one line for the demand for butter and one line for the demand for guns, and the market determines the price for both things based on what the demand is and what the supply is, and it's just a way to like understand how price discovery works in a market.
Well, I got a B, so I must have done a pretty good cram the night before, because I didn't go to any of the classes.
Yeah.
Oh, it was dry. But we had micro and macro, and I think I did both of them. But what Michael Hudson was saying that in the show we were discussing last week, David, was that in school they teach you that it's all a barter. Everybody ends up even at the end. You got your guns and I got my butter, and you got some of my butter, but I got some of your. But in general, everything is just trading this for that.
Yeah.
This is. He says no, that's not what it's about. It's about finance. it's all about finance, and that big word finance, which in most people would just go like, "Ugh, don't tell me about finance. I don't want to know."
Yeah.
But you know about finance, and is that not actually the story of how they get rich? Is to just
Yeah.
manipulate these those of us that got B's in econ, and thought, oh, the world is all just balancing and trading this for
Most,
that,
most
no, it's
people
finance.
most people just want a broker with a Hermes tie and the Gucci loafers and, comforting. And, again, like I worked in a brokerage place and sort of saw how, the sausage was made as far as like creating retirement plans for people. And again, it was like heartbreaking for me because I, wanted to be the person, looking at the balance sheets and the income statements and like, discovering these things. So when I hear these stories, I have to say it's like sad for me, but yeah, I mean, it's fractional reserve lending when you learn that you can, how you can lend, based on what's called a oh my gosh, I haven't studied. There's a reserve ratio that you need to have, and you're able to lend additional currency based on how much you have in the bank, and you're able to sort of have multiplied effect for every dollar that um, you print. You're able to print more based on fractional reserve lending. So yeah, it is it's a trust operation. Like a lot of things, and you just and and the other thing that I think that is sometimes said, which I think is really true, is that the economy is supported by threat of violence too. I mean, I know that's something that like people don't like to think about, but that's a lot of the petrodollar system was that we're going to clear our trades in US dollars, and we're going to provide military hardware so that you can either, you know, take territory or defend your territory. So there is an element of force that, um, is understandable. I mean, you just go back to the Middle Ages. It was the sheriff was the person that collected the taxes from people. And, the sheriff was the guy that had the sword, right? Ride around on the horse.
And the other thing, the point that I think is very important about your sheriffs of in the olden days was that, they got a cut. Whatever they collected, they would either get a third or 40% or, whatever the king because the king did not want to mess around with keeping track of salaries and taxes and stuff. He just said, you get sheriff, you go out there and, you tell the people how much they owe and you collect it.
And you put them on, and you have your advisor say, and you put the sheriff on a commission.
Right.
That can be the bad guy. He can shake them down. He has a motivation to collect more, to tax more, and then you have a level of insulation because now you can just say, well, the sheriff's a jerk. It's not me. I mean, these sheriffs are running wild. So it's a smart plan. I mean, I feel like they've thought this stuff out. It's not new.
And that's exactly what, you hear about the original the black nobility in Italy was that, they would be these great nobles in the daytime, but at night, they'd put on the black capes and go out and then turn into cutthroats and just rob the tourists and anybody that was out on the roads. They would never know that it was the guy that served them dinner that just cut their throat, that kind of thing has gone on a long time. And, again, we accept that we have a mafia in our country. Well, why do we have to have a mafia in this country? Well, I guess at some point, they do serve a purpose, and that is to make sure that the wheels keep turning and that the what do you call it? The juice, the
Well, the VIG, yeah,
the
the VIG.
the vig gets paid. You got to that's really you got to have the baseball bats to make sure the vig gets paid. And at some point, the whole thing depends upon violence, as you said.
Yeah, it's sad but true. But I do think that the deeper kind of thing behind this Sam Bankman-Fried and his FTX is that I think what they're going to do, or at least try to market, is these independent Bitcoin exchanges are they're not safe, they're not secured. We need more regulation. We need to centralize this. We need to have a Bank of International Settlements for crypto. And again, in the Brave New World or whatever, instead of having the kneecap breakers with the baseball bats, the sluggers or whatever, instead you can just throw the whammy on people through their Bitcoin exchange and just, freeze their assets or take their assets like just electronically. And I think that is part of the kind of the World Economic Forum idea. I mean, and again, it's like, I always look at these things, and it is a two-edged sword. I mean, yes, if you had an ethical, if it was just meant to be ease of transactions, and you don't have to, carry around cash or lose your money or whatnot, lose your wallet, like, it could be a good system. But I mean, it's also very easy to see that there is also an element of control and fear that's inherent in an electronic system. And of course, I'm the first one to say that I feel like we've had an electronic system almost my entire adult lifetime, because most people pay with a card, and for like the last at least 15 years we'll just pay online, or just do e-banking or whatnot. So we really are already very conditioned towards an electronic system. But yeah, I think that the U.S. dollar is definitely in play. That's something that I think people talk about is, either keeping the U.S. dollar alive, with having that stay as the reserve currency, or going to more like unipolar world. And we talk about different teams or whatever. Those could be the teams. It could be the Bank of International Settlements against the world, or the what's it called, the World Bank, that are but again, like, if you really look at it, there's a lot of crossover in the characters. So are there really two separate teams, or do you have people that float between, or how much do the characters even know? I mean, that's what I always look at. Like, I feel like a lot of people are especially like say like these like looking at the elections and the different people that are in these positions. Like, I feel like they're more, I don't think they're really read into a lot of the more of these like economic systems and stuff. I think they're meant more to talk about local issues. But again, like, I feel like the way that the debates, even the Trump versus Biden, like, the debates were hard for me to watch. I mean, they just don't get into issues that I feel like are real. It's just a lot of it's just frustrating to watch. I just feel like it's not like like a productive discourse.
Yeah, I agree. And I won't be enthusiastic for anybody until we really revamp it. Is the the idea of this nationally or even international companies running voting systems is wrong. And we have to get back to something like just hand counting of ballots. The the human is the answer. We have to have confidence in each other enough that, if I go to my local elementary school, where the people who are the election judges are also parents and grandparents of students in the school, and I might recognize them and they might recognize me. And, there's probably a community of a few hundred people that are going to be voting. And the tabulation done personally by hand by people who are election judges that are also members of the community, the odds of that being controversial is pretty small. I think those people are going to do a good job because they respect their neighbors, because they respect the system. And that's the way I think it was when I was growing up, was that, people would volunteer to be the election judge, not because they wanted that extra $20 or whatever you got, but because they really wanted to devote themselves to public service and in a very, very important way. So when we went to these electrical, digital, computerized systems, we gave up something that we should never have given up, in my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, again, like it's hard to have faith. I mean, I feel like a lot of people really specialize in this topic, and it's an area that I don't really get into as much. But I mean, again, yeah, my grandma and grandpa in Bloomington, Indiana, they used to always volunteer to help at the local election, and I feel like it was a lot of their like you said, it was a lot of their neighbors, and they people that you would know from your school or church or just your neighborhood. And yeah, I mean, I think that is a great system, but of course, I also now, like, the more I learn about Bloomington, Indiana, I'm just like, oh my gosh, there's so many paperclip people that were, like, mixed in, and you just think it's the you know the whole John Cougar Mellencamp song of just the Midwest college town or whatever. But there were, I mean, I can't you know it's hard. I still struggle with the reality. Like, Herman Muller was the next door neighbor, and Alfred Kinsey lived 5 houses away, and all these characters that were, again, just like tucked into the, and again, like the Benish, the nephew of the president of Czechoslovakia. Like, I'm just fascinated. Like, how did these people end up at IU? And then, of course, the other one is Dr. Willie Oppel, who, I know you're a musician. You may have read his books, but he knocks on the door when 1949. Oh, I'm here to be the head of the music school. Like, I need a place to stay. So he lived with my mom and my grandparents for over a year, and it's like, and so that's why, like, I'm, like, it's like, I do have, like, my reality of that was, it was just this really charming neighborhood, and everyone was really kind, and but there were all these very intriguing characters mixed in with it. So I don't, it's just a tough it's just tough to go, to not think of it the way that I experienced it. But when I review it, it's pretty alarming, and makes me very sad that my grandparents are gone, because I feel like they would be so interesting to talk to now with the things that I've been studying. And so but it's I do a lot of, like, why I try to work hard to do this is because I feel like Indiana, with this Eli Lilly, is such a nasty black character in this current story, with the whole Richard Lugar and Eli Lilly angle. And I want to, in some ways, like, be knowledgeable to try to defend them in some way, because, again, like, the people I knew were not, from what my experience, they weren't horribly bad people. But it's a tough, it's tough going through it. Like, even, like, we talked about Terre Haute and Indiana State University. I always try to defend them because that's where my grandma went. But William King Harvey's he's a real problematic character to try to not be hard on historically. His mom taught there, by the way. So,
Well, I never spent much time in Indiana. Um, I'm fascinated with Indiana University. That's where not only my piano teacher, but my voice teacher got masters there. And certainly Dr. Apple's world famous. A lot of great musicians from there. The great bass, Samuel Ramey, is one of my heroes. He was a Indiana University graduate, and is really one of the great basses of the 20th century, and an idol of mine as a singer. And yet, all of these things happen at the same time that what we find to be just very, very dark things have gone on.
yeah.
Well, we have so much better perspective now on the world and life and everything in general than they possibly could have had. Uh, i- you know, like the basic European attitude is, your neighbors are scary. You know, if they get too close, you have to beat them back because they want your stuff, and they're going to take your daughter and all that horrible stuff. That's basic default assumptions in most European civilizations, right up to today, I would say. Um, Whereas in America, we've never been, except for, cities and ghettos and that type of gang, but generally, the country has enjoyed the absence of that default feeling of you should be afraid of your neighbor. And the idea of us being a Christian nation in the 19th century was very strong. The idea of the golden rule and uh, respecting each other and having honor and always telling the truth, those kind of things were a part of American character that they're not anymore. Nevertheless, they're still with us in our ideals. And when you say, it's hard, of course it's hard. It's always going to be hard, but don't give up the ship. Don't
Yeah.
give up the ideals.
Well, like I said, I mean, they were really wonderful grandparents, and they were not, they did not share a lot of these, ideas that other people from, Indiana, that, people like David Starr Jordan that go out to, Stanford, that's, mixed up with all the Bohemian Grove and all the eugenics stuff. And I mean, they've even removed Jordan is no longer a street. That used to be a crossroad where my grandparents lived. And I was looking at a map with my mom like a month ago, and I'm like, where is, and they've taken Jordan out of there. So, it is, I don't know. Like I said, I mean, everyone was always really, good. People were really nice there. And, I have very positive experiences from Indiana, and that's why I do feel like this very strong need to try to share that, and not just let the whole Eli Lilly and because again, it's like I mean, we've talked about the Degussa, but that's what Mitch Daniels brought into the Tippecanoe Labs by Lafayette. It was Degussa, and it's now called Ivonic, but he's the one, when he was the governor of Indiana, he brought them to the old Eli Lilly animal pharmacy. So the potential for like a super dark character is there. And he's the current president of Purdue University, where my grandpa went. And the other person that I always think of is Harlan Fisk Stone, who was such a mentor to people like, J. Edgar Hoover and William Donovan and Frederick Delano Roosevelt. He was a Sullivan and Cromwell partner, but his brother was the president of Indiana, or of Purdue University. So that is always a very intriguing thing for me, because he was such a Columbia University law school person. He was Sullivan and Cromwell, so he would have been right there with the Dulleses, but he also then, of course, goes to the Supreme Court. So a very interesting historical character for me, and the fact that his brother was a Purdue president is a very interesting linkage with Mitch Daniels. Because again, like my grandpa just went there 2 years. He was an engineer, electrical mechanical engineer, but his teacher was a guy named Abraham Potter, who was a Russian. He was from St. Petersburg. And, if people have like studied like the history of engineering and stuff, like he's a name that some people would know, because he was into propulsion and rocketry and aviation and stuff like that. And of course, with that Russian background is just very, very intriguing, why he would go to Lafayette, Indiana, of all places.
So many intriguing things indeed. Thanks for sharing all of this once again with us, David. And I think about Indiana, and the first thing that comes to my mind is Hoagie Carmichael. and back home again in Indiana. You know,
And
I
that,
think that I can see the gleaming candlelight shining bright through the sycamores to me. The new mown hay sends out its fragrance across the fields I used to roam. I can almost see the moonlight on the Wabash,
yeah,
far from my Indiana home. And it's a beautiful tune, and you know, I'm sure that the Wabash is beautiful with the moonlight in it, and everybody sitting on the porch singing songs together, sipping on some gin or something. Sounds really idyllic, and I'm sure that you know, we have the wonderful along with the horrible. And
yeah,
uh, thanks very much for being part of McDuff Lives, and helping us get through,
yeah.
you know, together. We may never solve this, but you know, we're on the right road.
Well,
We're going in the right direction, and we made a hell of a lot of progress.
the good thing is that I can add to the Hoagie Carmichael, who was my grandma's all-time favorite. I mean, he is the Hoosier legend. Everybody in Indiana loves Hoagie. He
Yeah.
wrote Stardust at the Gables across from the IU Law School, which was an ice cream parlor where my mom would go after church every Sunday to get ice cream at the Gables, where Hoagie Carmichael was a law student when he wrote that song. So he is a local Bloomington guy, and he is also supposedly the inspiration of the James Bond character by Ian Fleming. So how he meets Ian Fleming is something that I'm trying to figure out.
Well, yeah, and what did he do did he have a spy business on the side maybe?
It probably was OSS. I mean, I feel like they always liked to, you know, the Oh So Social group. They needed somebody that was good on the piano that could sing a song. Got to bring Hoagie in, right?
And, uh, I don't want Hoagie to be in the OSS.
He
No,
was
I veto that.
he was the inspiration of Bond, though. So he's got to. I mean,
Well,
he had
you,
left a very serious impression for to be the, you know, the iconic character.
oh man. Okay, I'm going to look into this, but I'd like so much to just think of him as the most wonderful American composer and lyricist, and so creative. Look at him on YouTube, guys. If you want, there's some great black and white videos of him performing on the piano and singing his songs. All right, David Cranmer, Underdown. Once again, it's been a pleasure. Thanks everyone for being with us, and I will see you all tomorrow. Good night, David.
Good night.